Yo, Aster here and welcome to the Genshin Impact event tier list, where today I will be showing to you my favorite and my personal most disliked events in 1.1 all the way to 2.6's Irodori Festival. So let's begin with 1.1. Now here's the thing with 1.1, I can't really give you an actual criticism about this because, fun fact, I started in 1.2. Now the thing about 1.1 is that I absolutely love this story. For me, I think I'll be putting 1.1 a little higher just because, one, the story event is really nice, and the actual premise of the story is one of the more interesting parts because Genshin Impact's star system was never really explained, even right now. Like, imagine that. We are so far into the future that 1.1 is still such a relevant event that we don't... Who knows what's up there in the fake sky? Not me. Unreconciled Stars for a part 2, and I really hope that we'll get us a part 2 of the Unreconciled Stars. Not really about, Fischl, Mona, and Scaramouche, maybe just talking about the general aspect of the sky. Now the thing is though, I didn't like that it was focused on an NPC. I remember back then I was looking around at the past, I was asking around my friends what did they think of the 1.1 event, and a lot of them were talking about the fact that they all thought Leonard was so important that he was Scaramouche, like Leonard was Scaramouche's real name. So it was pretty interesting when they found out that it was an NPC, and everyone was kind of like, okay, sure. But that really didn't deter from anything. They really just enjoyed the event itself. So I'll be putting that in part 2 because I didn't get to play part 1. So, maybe we'll get around to part 2. The Chalk Prince and the Dragon. Now, this one was my very first event, so this has a very special place in my heart. I think we can all collectively agree that Reckless Palette has somehow, someway shot up everyone's lists of most hated NPCs when he pushed Sucrose. I'm someone that enjoys exploration. This was the first time we actually got the Dragon Spine, and this event had a lot of exploration in it, plus we got the boss at the end, which was really cool. Since this was the first time that I ever started playing, I was absolutely mauled when we got to the Ridges Vine, and I was getting carried, so we don't talk about that. I think that the story of the Chalk Prince and the Dragon really did wonders for building up Albedo as a character, and, well, technically we already got the part 2 of this story in the form of 2.3's event, so we're just going to be putting that here. Honestly though, now that I think about it, I should be putting it a little higher. Like, I feel really bad for the new people that missed 1.2, and then you have to learn Albedo's story to 2.3, and then next year's Christmas, and then next year's Christmas, and you have no idea where to even start because you're gonna get pulled into a story that's already been built for several years. So I feel super bad for you if you missed the Chalk Prince and the Dragon. Next up, we have 1.3. Oh boy, the original Lantern Rite. Now, if you were not in Genshin Impact when the original Lantern Rite came out, good for you. I really like Theater Mechanicus, don't get me wrong, but I don't think 1.3's main event was any good. The newer versions of the events of festivals have more characters in it and more life because, that's why you go to the festivals to meet your friends. The thing is, with 1.3's Lantern Rite, we got none of that. We got NPC galore. So if you've ever had to grind through all of the Primo Gems for this event, I feel so bad for you. The main event was not enough to carry it. The NPC galore was just not achieved. The last cutscene though, I think is very iconic. I think the last cutscene was absolutely gorgeous. But it was not enough. I will tell you this right now. The NPC galore was just too much for me. I'm so sorry. Wind Bloom Festival. Now, if you think that 1.3 was bad, 1.4 was an absolute god sent from above, and unfortunately it was a Mondstadt quest, which means that now, when 1.1, 1.2, and 1.4, it was such a popular belief at the time that Mondstadt quests were just superior because 1.3's Lantern Rite event was an absolute catastrophe, and 1.4's Windbloom Festival was exactly what a festival needed to feel like. The thing about 1.4's Windbloom Festival is that it just feels nice. It was everything that the Lantern Rite wasn't, like the original Lantern Rite at the very least. Everything at the Lantern Rite wasn't. You had Venti that was accompanying you every time, and Venti just in general was the perfect person to follow you around when it came to a festival. Imagine if they had Rosario follow you around. Like, that was not achieved, but they made the really great decision of putting Venti as your chaperone, I guess, like the chaperone PC for this one. Kind of a breath of fresh air, not really big on the lore stuff. Like, it might have a little bit of hints in lore, like Kaya's Conry and Descent, and what is a wind bloom in general, but it didn't really have that big of a lore to deal with. It's not like 1.1 or 1.2. So this one just felt nice, you know what I mean? Now we move on to 1.5. Now 1.5 is actually the filler content. Now this was the filler. This was something that a lot of people are just like, there was an event. Now, the thing with 1.5 is that it was empty. Now, the main event of this whole thing was technically Zhongli's story quest. And that's actually a very big problem because Zhongli's story quest is like one quest. The Energy Amplifier event actually has a lot of lore in it. When I went back in there and started sifting through the lore, there was actually a lot of lore in it. I was really shocked that they mentioned the domain trees, the Irminsul, and the fruits. But it was just, you know, it's just a fighting event. That's it. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, you just go around and punch stuff. Like, this was the one with the cubes around the map. Like, the one where you have to use your energy, like the fruits of the Irminsul, in order to remove resistances. That's it. That's basically it. But I personally enjoy combat. Like, I really like combat events, personally. But I do understand that this one was just this one was a pretty niche one. If you like combat, this is your event. But if you like lore, this was not it. For me, I would actually just rate this a little higher, but because of the lack of an actual main story, I'm going to be putting it as you're enough. Now, 1.6. 1.6. If you think 1.4 was fun, 1.6 was an absolute godsend because we had like at least 3 patches of constant lack of content where everyone was just begging for new places, and 1.6 came along before Inazuma as a beacon of hope, and it was featuring our Bebe Klee, our Spark Knight Klee reporting for duty, and it was actually a pretty fun event. I liked it. I think everyone was just so happy to go into a new place with new exploration and new minigames and actual lore. It was a fascinating event, and it was executed really nicely. There were a lot of minigames and there were a lot of exploration, and it didn't actually feel like you were doing nothing. You were going to a new place, you were exploring a lot more things, and 1.6 I think is just one of the best kinds of events because it builds up a new character in the form of Alice, it builds up lore in the form of Alice, and it just makes you feel really happy to be with the Mondstadt crew, which is why it's so fascinating that almost all before 1.6, almost all of the big events, the Liyue events were just lagging behind in terms of quality because it was just a constant flow of Mondstadt events. So it was a fascinating time. It was fascinating now that you look at it from a wider perspective, that Liyue events were just lagging behind in terms of quality. Now we have the Beidou event, and I will tell you this right now though, the Beidou event is not supposed to actually be an event because this was the start of Inazuma. This was the start of 2.0, which is fair game. The fair game here is that the main event is not supposed to be the actual main event. It's supposed to be Inazuma. It's supposed to be the new region, the new things. And the main event is just, you know, to say that, hey, here's your obligatory 1000 Primo Gems, which is fair game, and nothing wrong with that. But I actually don't remember this event at all. I don't even remember if this has any lore. All I know is that it didn't really have any kind of PCs because we were focusing on Inazuma, which is not that bad. So I'm just gonna put it down here for, I just did this for the Primos. Like, I think everyone can agree with that. We just did this for the Primos, okay? And now we move on to Liyue's comeback, known as the Moonlight Merriment, or the Guoba event. Now, Guoba's event is so adorable. If you thought that this event couldn't get any better just by showing the Liyue NPCs, you got Guoba. Guoba is just there. Guoba is just chilling. And then we got like the biggest plot twist in all of Genshin Impact, where we find out that Guoba is actually a god on the same level as Barbados, Morax, and Baal, where Guoba at one time was on the echelon of an Archon. That's how weird that was. Like, Guoba is an Ars Goetia god. But this event in general just felt so nice. It's finally great to see the Liyue characters just walking around, and we got the obligatory Liyue cutscene, where we finally get a wide pan of Liyue enjoying themselves. And this wasn't the Lantern Rite, but this feels really great. The Liyue characters were not getting any love, so, you know, this felt nice. This felt nice. The Shadow Labyrinth Warriors. Now, this one actually is going to be a little bit of a debate, because for me, I liked the Labyrinth Warriors. I liked Tartaglia, I liked Shunyan, and I liked Shikitaisho. I personally, this event for me actually just has a very special place in my heart, just because of not only was the gameplay pretty interesting, like they actually introduced dungeons and the prospect of randomly generated dungeons in the future, which, you know, has a lot of promise for Genshin Impact. They also chose 2 characters that are pretty entertaining to be put together. I really liked Tartaglia here. I really appreciated his presence. I think that it was pretty funny, his interactions with the Traveler, and not to mention, it was a little bit of a lore dump, so I think like it might be less points for some people, but you know, I'm a lore content creator, so screw me. And I actually pretty enjoyed Shikataisho's story. I think Shikataisho's story, connecting with the Kitsune Saigu, with Harunosuke, I think that was his name. It was a pretty okay one for me, personally. Gameplay-wise, it was pretty great. And the event itself wasn't all that bad. But next one, we have the almighty Among Us gameplay. This one was one of the most hyped up events, next to 1.6's Klee event. This one had everyone just go, what the hell just happened, when you went into the trailers for the first time. And it was such an unfortunate circumstance that I was absolutely spoiled the moment I posted my potential theories. And I was so sad because the leaks started coming in because of the algorithm. But nevertheless, I absolutely loved this event. Not only was there no unnecessary NPCs walking around, no need for any of those weird things, those weird voiceless stock characters. No, you just get Bennett, Eula, Albedo, and Amber just chilling there with you, and then you get one of the coolest plot lines that we've ever had in Genshin Impact, the Among Us, where they build up the idea that not everyone is who they seem to be, and they finally opened up this early in the game, by the way. Mind you, this game is supposed to run out until 7 years. 7 years. They actually confirmed, that's the thing, that's the important part, confirmed that Albedo was a synthetic human this early in the game, which is really fascinating, and I feel so bad for the people that didn't get to experience this event, to experience the, oh my god, that guy is not Albedo. Dude, get the heck away from that guy. I'm so sorry to the new people that would never get to experience what it's like to actually meet and see Subject 1, or I mean Subject 2. Fake Albedo. So Albedo's story, again, for me, really special place in my heart because Albedo lore and endgame lore. Also, the event itself is actually pretty fun. Like, the gameplay of the event is actually pretty fun, so I like it. Plus, the snowmen were really cute. And now we move on to 2.4, the Kaching Dating Simulator, as I like to call it. This event had 3 people on its banner, and none of them got the main spotlight. It went to Kaching! That's so funny to me. The fact that Xiao, Ganyu, and Shenhe were the ones that were used as promo art because they were the banners, and none of them were the actual main foci of the story because this was a Kaching story event. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed it. Kaching's new dress and Ningguang's new dress, also we got the Beiguang stuff, congratulations. Though there were less lanterns for this one, kinda interestingly enough. There were less lanterns, so kinda sad. Next is we have the Enjo and Kanemia stuff. Now here's the thing about this one. This one has a lot of lore. I will admit, this one has a lot of lore and this one has Enjo. The thing is though, I actually don't know how to feel about this event because this event was pure exploration. Now the thing is, it's not like 1.6, you know what I mean? 1.6's event had new islands. This one just made you go into the same place, making you think that it was a new place because they added more things. For me, I would just put it as you're enough. On the other hand, though, you got a lot of lore crumbs when it came to the Enkanomiya people, the Bishop people, as they would call it, and the people with the snake eyes. So that will definitely be, you know, I'll put it a little higher. Let's give it more lore credit. Though we did have Enjo, so you know, that's a really great factor, and I really like Enjo, so we're putting that up there. 2.5, baby. And last but certainly not the least, the Irodori Festival. Now, I really like the Irodori Festival. I think I've already said this in a previous post before, that Irodori Festival for me is just great. Like, Irodori Festival for me was not unnecessary in terms of its execution. It didn't waste time, it didn't show any unnecessary NPCs, it built up using a character that we already know and love, Kazuha's story, instead of an NPC that we have no idea about. And the anecdotes, that's one of the important parts. The anecdotes aren't NPCs, they're PCs. Something that the Lantern Ride didn't. So that's what's fascinating about the Irodori Festival. They are all PC related. Of course, we did have the NPCs just roaming around, but they were supporting cast as they should be. They are supporting cast and not main cast. We got a continuation of the story of Kazuha, and Kazuha doesn't actually have a story quest, which is interestingly enough. Like, I'm kind of surprised that it's not in an actual main story because... oh boy, I wonder why. I wonder why they didn't do that. Maybe it's because they're saving it for the Kazuha rerun where he's going to get a side story. But if that's the case, then I don't think Kazuha's second part of the story will ever come because the guy that's involved in his story is kind of somewhere else in Sumeru. So, you know, I do think that Irodori Festival, in terms of just execution, and in terms of just storytelling, in terms of pacing, and in terms of side content. The gameplay for the Irodori Festival, I'm so sorry if you guys liked them, but I didn't like it. I used to be a really big fan of a Theater Mechanicus, but for some reason this Theater Mechanicus just did not rub off well for me. Not to mention, like, Ayaka's event and Venti's event was pretty weird. Like, it didn't actually have a lot of interactivity with it. You just went around and took pictures of random dogs. I'm like, okay, like, that's technically gameplay, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. So yeah, the Irodori Festival story was absolutely top-notch. I think that all the future events of Genshin should do this, should take a page out of the Irodori Festival when it comes to writing stories, writing pacing, and just the general feel of a story. For me personally, I think that one of the better stories, one of the better events in Genshin Impact is the ones that don't waste your time. But there are just some stories and some ways that you can incorporate it where it builds into the bigger, grander picture of Genshin Impact. Yes, of course, I know that they're limited stories, but that doesn't mean that you just don't show any kind of long-term content in them in general. Albedo's story is mostly all in events, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So here's my final rankings when it comes to events. Actually, I might put this a little lower. I'm going to be putting this on You're Enough just because I personally don't really like the idea of reskinning and Kanemia in general, and the main event wasn't really that big, but nevertheless, I really like the current state of Genshin Impact storytelling. I like that they're incorporating more PCs and less NPCs. And here's the 2.7, hope we get something from the Chasm, and I hope that we get more Yellen content. But nevertheless, my name is Aster, and thank you for chilling with me.